this is Jay Mitchell. We are back with another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have Trump media gives DJT shares to FBI pick Kash Patel, Linda McMahon, and President's son from CNBC.com by Swampyanky Dan. And yeah, I personally think that's kind of on the griftier side, but ultimately, I think pretty much all government and politics is grift at this point, just like everything else, so I don't think it really matters too much. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have federal employees told to remove pronouns from email signatures by end of day from abcnews.go.com, hosted by Donald Key. And yeah, I personally don't really care for people who have pronouns in their email signatures. I think they're kind of only usually the insufferable woke virtue signaling type. But with that being said, I don't think it should be mandated for them to not have it. Personally, I think it'd be better if they do have it, so I know which people are more on the woke side than not on the woke side. And that's my thoughts on that issue. So yeah, my libertarian thing would be, if you want to have pronoun signatures nearby, you should be able to. And if you don't want to, you shouldn't have to. With Trump and the Republicans, they're going to say, we want to mandate it so that they don't have them. But, Biden and the Democrats wanted to mandate so you did have them. So neither of those are that libertarian, I would say. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have all FBI agents involved in Trump cases, including those with court order to raid Mar-a-Lago, to be fired soon from MSN.com by CH Relax. And that's a cross post from the law subreddit. And yeah, I personally don't really care for, Trump's vindictiveness, but, ultimately, as long as those FBI agents aren't getting replaced, I think that's a win for libertarians. Libertarians believe that the less government agents there are probably the better, because that means that would have to be a smaller government if they has less workers for it. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump, nothing Canada, Mexico, or China can delay February 1st tariffs from Reuters.com by FlimsyOut5563. And yeah, I personally don't really care for tariffs, but if Trump wants to implement them, I think he should be able to. But a lot of people who are against tariffs now because Trump's against them were completely fine with them when Biden or Obama did them. So it's just really they're not principled. They don't really. It's not that they don't like tariffs. They just think everything Trump does is fascism by default. And yeah, I personally don't really care for tariffs, but if the government wants to do them, that's on them. I personally don't really care for taxation in any sense, and tariffs are essentially just a tax on imported goods. And yeah, that's why I personally don't really care for them. Then we have watch live coverage, 6 people on board during plane crash in Philadelphia, multiple houses on fire from CBSNews.com, posted by Dr. Who 07. And yeah, I personally don't really care for plane crashes, and now the progressives are going to say, it's because Trump fired all the FAA people. It's because people are always just using stuff to push their agenda these days. Accidents happen regardless of what the policies are. So I personally think if people want to take precaution, that's fine. But everything's just used to push an agenda these days, and it's getting rather tiresome. And that's my thoughts there. Then we have union membership fell in 2024, hitting new low from Lemon Limelight. And they said from the Washington Post, union membership fell in 2024, hitting new low. The share of American workers and unions edged down in 2024, reaching its lowest level on record, even as the year was marked by a surge in union election filings and several profile strikes. The union membership rate dropped by 0.1 of a percentage point to a new low of 9.9% last year. The Labor Department said Tuesday, while the total number of union members in the United States barely budged last year for a loss of roughly 100,000 members. A decades-long decline in union membership has been attributed to the shift toward a service-based economy, the influx of right-to-work laws, and fierce employer opposition to unions. That contrasts with growing evidence that Americans are on the side of labor unions. Support for unions has soared over the past decade was at 70% in 2024, near levels not seen since the 1960s, after hitting record low during the Great Recession, according to Gallup polling. And yeah, I personally don't really care for unions, but, if workers do want to form a union, I think they should be able to do so. And yeah, I definitely do think, it's interesting how the support for unions is higher than ever, but not the membership in unions. People, I think, will support the idea of the union, but not necessarily that they want to be in the union themselves, especially for how high the union dues are and how, authoritarian a lot of the union bosses tend to be. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have NTSB restricted to using MuxX for news updates from the desk.net by CH Relax. And yeah, I personally don't think any government agencies should be restricted to using one news website. But if they want to use if the government wants to justify doing that, that's on them. Yeah, ultimately that I think people should be able to use whatever websites they want to. But yeah, ultimately, I do think X is probably one of the better websites when it comes to free speech. So I do like, and Trump and Musk are kind of in bed right now, so I guess that makes sense. But yeah, I personally think they should be able to post on whatever website they want to. But I personally don't really think we should have an NTSB at all. I would say. I can't even tell you what it stands for off the top of my head. So if they, but so yeah, I think the libertarian position is if they let them post on whatever websites they want to, but they really shouldn't even exist in the first place. Then we have Trump administration releases California dam water without state approval from Newsweek.com by Tom 13, and they added this is going to completely break the irrigation plans for later this year, pushing produce prices even higher than they would have been just with the tariffs and removal of migrant workers. This sort of dumbass centralized planning is exactly what most Trump voters would call communism. I wonder what they're calling it now. And yeah, I personally don't really care for that. I guess they did have all the wildfires out there, so they need some water to be used for that. But I do think if the government wants to be authoritarian and act on its authoritarian impulses, it should be able to. And yeah, I don't think it really matters too much. It's just another Trump bad headline. The suburbs might as well be called Orange Man Bad at this point. Then we have breaking Elon Musk's Doge team now has full access to Treasury's payment system per MYT, posted by Donald Key, and that's cross from the Fluent in Finance subreddit. And yeah, I personally, if Trump wants to give Elon and Doge access to whatever they want to, I think they should be able to. He should be able to. I personally think Doge is just kind of a meme. I don't think it's really any real stuff's going to get passed through there. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. People are saying, oh, all these federal government employees are getting fired, but I have yet to see it. I'm just going to have to wait to see. Hopefully, we do get some government efficiency, but the government really only grows regardless of which branch of the Unity Party is in power, so I'm not too optimistic on that. Then we have Elon Musk sues Lego, Nestle, and more brands, accusing them of advertising boycott from NPR.org, posted by Ninja Lover. And yeah, I personally don't really care for that. I think it's freedom of association, but you do have the argument that they might be collaborating with groups like Media Matters to stay off the platform. But yeah, I definitely do think even if they're collaborating with the DNC directly, it's still freedom of association, and they shouldn't be forced to run his ads. They shouldn't be forced to run their ads on his website even if they don't want to. Then we have the price America will pay for Trump's tariffs, alienating allies and partners of the U.S. desperately needs more. It means that America First will be America alone, from theatlantic.com by Donald Key. And yeah, I said it, as I said before, I don't care for tariffs, but they only care about people only care about them because Trump's doing them. Not if it was Biden doing them, they'd say they were the greatest thing ever. Then we have, how are we to feel empathy when they fly the flag of the country they do not want to return to while burning the flag of the country they want to stay in, from Ragnar OKXG, and that's crosspost from the actual public freakout subreddit. Protesters in California burn the American flag to protest deportations. And yeah, I do think flag burning is free expression, but when a bunch of Mexicans just burn the flag, it's hard not to feel sympathy when they get it's hard to feel sympathy for them when they get deported, because they're just jerks who probably they're not burning the Mexican flag, they're burning the flag of the country they're currently in, and that just goes to show you how all these illegals here, they feel entitled to respect just by being here, when in reality, they're not entitled to anything. It's just called illegal immigration for a reason, and that's my thoughts on that issue. I personally wouldn't have any borders or immigration laws if in my libertarian world, but that's not how the world works currently. So if they get deported, I'm not going to feel too much sympathy for them. They're just, you can't care for the whole world. So if America wants to deport some of them, that's on them. I think the welfare state's already big enough as it is, and adding these twats as well just is too much. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump wants to deport legal immigrants now from Baton 13. That's crosspost from Behind the Bastard subreddit. And yeah, Trump says a lot of things I don't think he's going to do, so I think this is one of them. I personally, he seems to have enough trouble as it is with all the undocumented immigrants, but, if you want to think he's going to deport legal immigrants as well, you think whatever you want to. Then we have concrete barricades going up around White House from Dose by Donkey, and that's crosswords from the Pick subreddit. And yeah, this is just more Blue Anon stuff. Reddit's pretty much just all blueanon.com at this point. Then we have Trump says Canada would have lower taxes, better military protection, no tariffs, becomes our cherished 51st state from LatinTimes.com by Swamp Yankee Dan. And yeah, I personally don't really want Canada to be part of the Union. Personally, I think we need less states in the Union as is. Personally, I just want to get rid of the entire Union and have all the states be independent and then start splitting those states up. And, I think the libertarian perspective is to be pro-secession down to the individual level if people want it. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have OOCAUM. And that's crosswords it's from Donald Key, crosswords from the Facepalm subreddit, from the Republicans Against Trump Twitter account. Just in, BC Primer David Ebby says he has directed BC liquor sales to immediately stop buying American liquor from red states and remove the highest selling brands from those states from the shelves of the province's liquor stores. And yeah, I think it's interesting how when Trump says he wants he wants tariffs, it's bad, but when the BC Primer says we're going to tariff and force stores to remove whiskey and other alcoholic products from red states, it's completely justified. These people have no principles. It's just whatever the in-group does is good, and whatever the out-group does is bad. And yeah, then we have, I know there are plenty of people who think claims of fascism regarding this administration are out of place, but sincerely, this is what fascism looks like from InsideMedicine.substack.com by Ben Corrigan. And that was breaking news. CC orders massive reaction and revision of submitted research across all science and medicine journals. Banned terms must be scrubbed. And yeah, personally, I don't think the CDC should exist at all, and it definitely shouldn't be telling private medical journals what they can and can't publish. So I think the libertarian position here is just get rid of the CDC entirely and get rid of the government involvement in any science and medical journal altogether. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Phyllis Fong, who was investigating Elon Musk's brain implant startup Neuralink, forcibly removed from office after refusing termination order from the Times of India by Ninja Lover, and then he adds, investigate Musk's companies, Trump will fire you. And yeah, ultimately, I don't really care for any government investigations at all, but if the government does want to kick people out for whatever reason, that's on them. Sometimes, it doesn't really matter. I'm sure if it was the other way around and it was a MAGA person being kicked out by a new Democrat administration, it would be the greatest thing ever, but since it's the out-group picking out the in-group rather than the other way around, it's the worst thing ever. Then we have Smoot Harley Terror Fact. We truly live in the stupidest timeline, and that's linked to the Smoot Harley Terror Fact page from Wikipedia from C.H. Warlocks. And yeah, I personally don't really care for tariffs, but this is kind of just irrelevant right now. It was a bad tariff the U.S. government enacted in 1930. It's kind of irrelevant for now just because we're still passing tariffs to this day. I personally don't really care for tariffs, but the only reason, again, as I said previously, is because the out-group's doing them rather than the in-group. That's the only reason they don't really care for them right now. Then we have the Democrats show why they lost from Lemon Limelight, and they said from the Atlantic, the Democrats show why they lost. The Democratic Party, at least in theory, is an organization dedicated to winning political power through elected office. This might seem hard to believe on the evidence provided by its official proceedings. The Democratic National Committee's meetings included a land acknowledgement, multiple shrieking interruptions by angry protesters, and a general affirmation that strategy has been sound, except perhaps insufficiently committed to legalist race and gender essentialism. The good news about the DNC for those who prefer that the country is a political viable alternative to the authoritarian personality running it, is that the official Democratic Party has little power. The DNC is not the party's message, nor will it determine its next presidential candidate. The bad news is that the official party's influence is so meager in part because the party is largely addicted to a collection of progressive activist groups. These groups, funded by liberal donors, seldom have a broad base of support among the voting public, but have managed to amass enormous influence over the party. They've done so by monopolizing the brand values of various causes. Climate groups, for instance, define what good climate policy means, and they judge candidates based on how well they affirm these positions. The same holds true for abortion, racial justice, and other issues that many Democrats deem important. The groups are particularly effective at spreading their ideas through the media, especially but not exclusively through their work of progressively right-wing journalists, which could lean on both the expertise that groups provide and the ability to drive news by, say, scolding Democrat candidates who fall short of their standards of ideological purity. And I'd agree with that. I think the big problem with the Democrats right now is, the woke have completely taken over them, and people say now that they're out of power, they're going to drop wokeness. But I think wokeness is just too ingrained into them at this point. And also, they can't go. They seemingly can't go 5 minutes without woke scolding people who just dissent at all. And I don't think that's a way to get votes. So yeah, I personally think the Democratic Party, it's time for them to throw in the towel and just quit entirely. But sadly, politics is grift, and the Democratic Party is probably just gonna be more profitable now than ever that the Orange Man's back in the White House. So yeah, that's my thoughts there. I personally think it's 200 years old. I don't think it's going away anytime soon, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have the concept of authoritarianism. Why is it subjective? From Comfortable Pool 4684, and they said, I don't quite understand how authoritarianism is so subjective. We have bosses, governments, Reddit mods, admins, Ernst, HTC relish in authoritarian styles. But some people will deny it's happening. President Trump is quite possibly one of the most authoritarian world leaders in the past 20 years, yet people will say he's not authoritarian, or they will say he's just doing what's right. How is this concept so divisive, even though you can literally point to authoritarian leadership style and easily outline why? And yeah, I personally, I would agree with that. The thing is, it's when the in-group does authoritarianism, it's entirely justified. When the out-group does it, it's the worst thing ever. And I like how they mentioned Reddit mods admins. Those guys are some of the most authoritarian pieces of shit I've ever seen. But, the Reddit would never call them out on it because they're usually in the in-group rather than the out-group. Then we have Trump tariffs target loophole used by Chinese online retailers from Bloomberg.com by Panam Furtan. And, yeah, I personally don't think tariffs are justified, even if the companies that they're against, like Temu and Shein, I think the OP listed, even if they apply unethical labor practices, I still think it goes against the free market to impose tariffs on them. And that's my thoughts on that issue. And we have Elon Musk may have your social security number from nymag.com by Ninja Lover, and they added Elon Musk and his companies now have access to data no one outside the government has ever had. When you buy a present, you get rewarded handsomely. And yeah, that's just another, when Reddit's not going Orange Man bad, it's going Tesla Man bad. So yeah, ultimately, Social Security, I think, is a huge Ponzi scheme. We need to get rid of it as soon as possible. But, ultimately, if people have access to Social Security numbers, sometimes you can't decide who has access to Social Security numbers, so they're probably all floating out there on the internet for decades at this point, and no one really cares. But when the Tesla Man gets them, suddenly it's the worst thing ever. Then we have very brief summary of the LNC meeting last night from Dr. 07, and that's crosswords from the Libertarian Party USA subreddit. And I'm not going to read all that, but the LP enacted, the Libertarian Party enacted a new chair and vice chair. And personally, hopefully it gets away from the MAGAtarian stuff that the Mises Caucus has become. But, I think it's just going to go right into the wokeritarian stuff, because these days, people are either going to be MAGA or woke, it seems. And you can't be, and I would say both of those are very authoritarian, collectivist philosophies, and that's why I think, the Libertarian Party should be against both of those, but hopefully this new chair, Stephen Nicolia, isn't into all the woke stuff, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. And we have Right from CH4Locks, and that's crosswords from the curated Tumblr subreddit, and that's a post from Accidental Memes. Listen, if a bad president come in and take away our rights, we're dependent on a good president, replacing them in 4 years to give us back our rights, then we'd not have any rights. If politicians can take over distribute them, they're not inalienable and they're not rights. We don't have inalienable rights. We have conditional privileges divided according to the whims of whoever currently holds the reins. If we want to have actual rights, then we need to build a system in which no one has the power to take them away to begin with. And I would agree with that. I wouldn't agree with a lot of what's on Tumblr, but that makes sense. It just goes to show you that a lot of what we call rights are actually privileges granted by the government, and if the government wants to, they could take them away at any second. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.